The neutral zone, a stretch of space declared off-limits for any military activity, was typically a place of calm, a symbolic buffer between the galaxy's major powers. Within its heart floated the Galactic Command Station, a vast structure teeming with representatives from dozens of species, each working in harmony to maintain this delicate peace. The atmosphere aboard the station was relaxed, almost routine. Alien officers chatted in various languages, diplomats discussed trade agreements, and technicians monitored the usual empty void on their screens. Then, without warning, alarms blared across the station. Red lights flashed as the main display screens filled with an image that no one could have predicted, an enormous human fleet emerging from a hyperspace jump on the very edge of the sector. The fleet was massive, dwarfing anything the station had seen before. It was led by colossal warships, sleek, angular behemoths flanked by squadrons of agile fighter craft and specialized assault ships. They moved with an eerie precision, forming a perfect phalanx as they advanced. On the command bridge, chaos erupted. Admirals of various species, scaled Zoltran commanders, the insectoid Tar navigators, and the avian Vrax tacticians stared in shock at the screens. They frantically tried to make sense of the situation. The humans had signed peace accords only months ago. What were they doing here, in the heart of the neutral zone, armed to the teeth? Establish contact with the human fleet immediately, barked Admiral Zeiser, a towering Zoltran with dark, scaled skin. His voice, deep and resonant, cut through the confusion. Communications officers of different species rushed to comply, sending hails across every known channel, each message a plea for explanation. But the humans did not respond. Instead, the human fleet surged forward. Without a single word exchanged, the first wave of assault began. Targeting arrays flared to life as beams of concentrated energy and precise missile strikes slammed into the station's defensive satellites. Shield generators flickered and died. Automated turrets, the station's first line of defense, exploded in blinding flashes of light as human fighters picked them off with deadly accuracy. Alien officers shouted orders, their voices a blend of panic and disbelief. "Deploy the interceptors," a Tar tactician screamed, her mandibles clicking in agitation. Dozens of alien ships scrambled to launch, but they were met by waves of human fighters already in position, ready to intercept. The station's defense forces, designed only to deter small skirmishes, were no match for the surgical precision of the human attack. Amidst the chaos, a communications officer intercepted a fragmented transmission from the human fleet. The alien's skin paled as he played the garbled message for the admirals. It was filled with what sounded like human military jargon, but the words were jumbled, the signal distorted beyond recognition. No clear message could be deciphered. Only the harsh, clipped tones of a language spoken with urgency. "What are they saying?" demanded Admiral Zeiser, slamming his fist onto the console. The officers exchanged worried glances. No one knew. The language was familiar, but the context was lost, like hearing a conversation through a wall. Sounds without meaning. The admirals stared at the screens, trying to find logic in the madness unfolding before them. Humanity had been negotiating trade deals, participating in diplomatic talks. What could have prompted such an unprovoked, devastating strike? Was this a rogue faction? A declaration of war? Or something else entirely? As the human fleet pressed deeper into the neutral zone, the realization dawned on the command staff. This wasn't a simple show of force or a border skirmish. It was a full-scale invasion, executed with a precision that suggested extensive planning. The humans were here with a purpose, and they were not going to stop. For the first time in years, the neutral zone, a symbol of interstellar peace, had become a battlefield. The station shook as the human bombardment intensified, each impact a bone-rattling reminder of the relentless assault unfolding outside. The initial shock of the attack had worn off, replaced by the grim determination of the Galactic Command's elite defenders. The Zoltran shock troopers, renowned for their size and ferocity, were the first to be deployed. Their scaled, armored bodies and advanced energy weapons had been enough to turn the tide of countless battles. Alongside them, the hulking reptilian Cygor heavy infantry stomped into formation, their thick hides and kinetic barrier shields bristling with anticipation. High above, the avian Vrax aerial units took to the skies, their feathered forms a blur as they prepared to engage the human fighters. "Prepare for counterattack," barked General Virox, a Cygor commander whose deep, guttural voice filled the command center. He pounded his fist into his chest, a gesture mirrored by his soldiers. The Galactic Command had faced the best warriors the galaxy had to offer. They had no reason to fear a sudden, inexplicable human incursion. But fear soon turned to unease as the battle unfolded. The human fleet, instead of engaging head-on, splintered into smaller task forces. Each group moved with a fluid, almost predatory grace, slicing through the alien formations like a knife through cloth. The Zoltran shock troopers, expecting a direct assault, were instead flanked by human drop pod units that bypassed their defenses entirely. The pods crashed into the deck with bone-shaking force, and outpoured human soldiers clad in lightweight, adaptive combat suits. They moved like shadows, darting between cover and striking before the Zoltran could react. The Cygor heavy infantry, lumbering into position, found themselves targeted by human snipers and drone units hovering just out of reach. Precision shots hit their weak points, bypassing their kinetic shields. For the first time, the Cygor, fearsome warriors who had never known retreat, hesitated. "Where are they coming from?" roared General Virox as he swung his massive arm, crushing a drone that had ventured too close. His question was echoed across the battlefield. The humans didn't fight like any species they had encountered before. They didn't follow the expected patterns, didn't fall into predictable formations. They adapted with every minute, every maneuver. High above, the Vrax aerial units engaged the human fighter squadrons. The avian warriors were experts in three-dimensional combat, their wings slicing through the air with lethal precision. But even they found themselves outmatched. The human fighters were smaller, faster, more agile. They darted through the air like swarms of angry hornets, using electronic jamming and deceptive maneuvers to throw the Vrax off balance. The alien pilots, accustomed to the predictable dogfighting tactics of other species, struggled to keep up. In the command center, the scene was one of growing chaos. Alien tacticians, once confident in their superior numbers and advanced technology, now shouted over each other, their voices a cacophony of panic and confusion. Admiral Zeiser slammed his fists against the control panel, his scaled knuckles bleeding from the force. "This isn't a standard attack. They are improvising," he spat, his voice tinged with disbelief. Improvising wasn't supposed to work against the Galactic Command. Their military doctrine was based on centuries of experience, honed through battles against pirates, raiders, and the occasional rogue species. They had planned for every scenario, or so they thought. The humans, however, played by no known rules. Outnumbered but not outmatched, the human ground forces employed guerrilla tactics. They moved in small, coordinated teams, using the station's layout to their advantage. One moment, they were in the open, trading fire. The next, they vanished into maintenance shafts and access tunnels, only to reappear behind enemy lines. Explosions rocked the station as sabotage teams disabled key power nodes, plunging sections of the command center into darkness. It was warfare as the aliens had never seen, swift, brutal, and utterly unpredictable. General Virox watched in horror as his Cygor soldiers were driven back step by step, their line of defense crumbling under the relentless human onslaught. The Zoltran, typically invincible in close combat, found themselves overwhelmed by human soldiers who fought with a speed and ferocity that left no room for retaliation. The Vrax aerial units, outmaneuvered, began falling from the sky, their wings clipped by human missiles that seemed to appear from nowhere. "We need to regroup," shouted Admiral Zeiser, trying to impose order on the chaos. He gestured to his tacticians, his voice barely audible over the alarms and explosions. "Fall back to the inner defensive ring. We need to buy ourselves time." But time was not on their side. The inner defensive ring, a last bastion of hope, was soon breached. Human forces poured through the gaps in the defenses, targeting critical systems with frightening precision. The station, once a symbol of peace and unity, was now a battlefield strewn with the wreckage of broken ships and the bodies of fallen soldiers. Flames licked the walls, casting a hellish glow across the corridors as smoke filled the air. And still, the humans advanced. In the midst of the chaos, one question burned brighter than all the rest, voiced by every alien officer, every panicked soldier, every stunned admiral. Why are the humans attacking? What could have driven them to such lengths? To turn their entire military might against a neutral zone without warning or explanation. It was a question with no answer. Only the silence of space, broken by the roar of engines and the crack of weapons fire. The Galactic Command was on the brink of collapse, and they still didn't know why. The roar of battle outside the command center was fading, replaced by the tense silence that filled the dimly lit room. Seated in a high-security interrogation chamber, a captured human officer stared defiantly at the line of alien admirals. Blood trickled down the side of his face, a fresh bruise darkening around his eye. Despite the clear signs of his capture, his posture was rigid, and his gaze held a steely resolve. Admiral Zeiser, flanked by General Virox and a Vrax tactician, stepped forward. The room was thick with an unspoken tension, the alien officers barely concealing their fury and confusion. Why? Zeiser demanded, his voice a low growl. Why would humanity launch this unprovoked attack? We had peace. The human officer, breathing heavily, said nothing at first. His eyes flicked between his captors, assessing them, still believing he was deep behind enemy lines in the midst of a vital mission. He clenched his fists, muscles tensed as if he expected to be tortured rather than questioned. "Speak, human," snarled General Virox, slamming his massive fist onto the table, making it shudder. "Your forces have crippled our defenses. You owe us an explanation." For a long moment, the human remained silent, then finally he spoke. "You think we attacked without reason?" His voice was hoarse, but there was a bitter edge to it. "We had no choice. We intercepted your transmissions." Admiral Zeiser frowned, his scaled brow furrowing. "What transmissions? What are you talking about?" The human officer, seeing their confusion, hesitated. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. "Weeks ago," he began, more slowly now, "we picked up a series of encrypted signals from this sector, high-level Galactic Command communications. When we decrypted them, it was clear you were planning to launch a superweapon, targeting Earth directly." The room fell into a stunned silence. Zeiser exchanged a glance with General Virox, while the Vrax tactician's feathers ruffled in agitation. "A superweapon?" Zeiser repeated, incredulously. "That's impossible. There is no such weapon. What exactly did you intercept?" The human officer, mistaking their shock for denial, leaned forward, his voice rising. "We saw the proof. Technical specifications, strategic coordinates, all pointing to a launch site here in the neutral zone. Our analysts were certain. We couldn't wait for you to strike first." The alien admirals listened, a growing sense of dread settling over them. The Vrax tactician hurriedly pulled up the intercepted logs on a display screen, scanning through the data. The truth hit them like a physical blow. This isn't a plan for a superweapon," the Vrax tactician muttered, eyes wide with realization. "These are standard training exercise communications. The coordinates are for a routine maneuver we've conducted for decades." Admiral Zizor's face went pale, scales losing their luster. He turned back to the human officer. "You misunderstood. Those transmissions were nothing more than part of a drill. A simple exercise. There was never any weapon, never any threat to Earth." The human officer's defiant expression crumbled, replaced by one of utter shock. "No, that can't be," he whispered, shaking his head as if trying to reject the words. "Our analysts, they were sure. We were sure." "Your analysts were wrong," General Virox snapped, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and pity. "This entire attack was based on a misinterpretation. You've launched a war over nothing." The weight of the revelation hit the human officer like a punch to the gut. He slumped in his chair, eyes wide and unseeing, as if the entire universe had shifted beneath his feet. He had believed in the mission, believed they were protecting their home from annihilation. Now he realized they had been fighting a phantom threat, a mistake that had cost countless lives. The alien admirals, still reeling from the shock, looked at each other, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and sorrow. Admiral Zizor's voice softened as he addressed the human. "You thought you were acting in self-defense? We understand that now. But this was a misunderstanding of catastrophic proportions." The human officer buried his face in his hands, the full gravity of the situation crashing down on him. "We thought we were saving Earth," he whispered, barely audible. "We thought we were stopping a war before it started. And instead," Zeiser replied quietly, "you started one that didn't need to happen." With the truth unveiled, the battle that had raged so fiercely comes to an abrupt and uneasy halt. Orders are broadcasted across the channels, and the once deafening roar of weapons fire fades into a tense, disbelieving silence. Ships on both sides hang in the void, battered and bruised, as their captains grapple with the reality of what has just happened. The human fleet, now understanding the colossal error that led them here, slowly withdraws, engines dimming as they retreat from the neutral zone. The wreckage of the battle, twisted metal, drifting bodies, and shattered vessels, floats in the aftermath, a stark reminder of the price paid for a misunderstanding. A ceasefire is hastily agreed upon, and an emergency council meeting is convened. For the first time since the attack began, human and alien representatives face each other not across the battlefield, but across a diplomatic table. The atmosphere is thick with tension, the room filled with the solemn faces of military leaders, diplomats, and ambassadors. Accusations are flung back and forth in the opening minutes, a mix of anger, regret, and disbelief coloring the heated exchanges. The humans, clearly embarrassed by the blunder, but still standing firm, step forward to offer a formal apology. "We believed we were under imminent threat," a human admiral begins, voice steady despite the shame that tinges the words. The intercepted messages pointed to a devastating strike against Earth. "We acted out of fear, out of a need to protect our own. It seems we were wrong." Admiral Zeiser, the Galactic Command's representative, listens with a hardened expression. "Your fear cost us dearly," he replies, gesturing to the images of the wrecked ships and the casualty reports scrolling on the screens behind him. "You attacked without warning, without confirmation. You assumed the worst of us?" The human admiral nods, taking a deep breath. "We did," he admits, his voice softer now. "But your transmissions were cryptic, filled with terminology we misinterpreted. What we thought were plans for a weapon were actually drills. Had we known, we would never have struck first." The room falls silent as the implications sink in. The Galactic Command, for its part, acknowledges its own fault. "We failed to consider how our messages might be perceived," Zeiser concedes. "We didn't think about how our military jargon could be misinterpreted by a species as new to the galactic stage as yours. It was an oversight on our part as well." In the end, a tentative truce is forged. Both sides agree to implement new communication protocols, ensuring that every future transmission is clear and understandable across all languages and cultural contexts. The tragedy has become a powerful lesson, one that will be taught in military academies and diplomatic circles for generations. It is a harsh but necessary reminder of the dangers of assuming the worst, especially when dealing with species that see the galaxy through different eyes. The story closes with the human officer, once a prisoner, now back aboard their ship. Standing at the viewport, they look out at the vast expanse of stars, each one a reminder of the unknowns that still exist between humanity and the other species of the galaxy. They reflect on the events of the day, understanding now the fine line between war and peace. In a single moment of fear and misinterpretation, that line had been crossed. It is a sobering thought, but one that carries a glimmer of hope as well. Perhaps, out of this chaos, a stronger bond can be formed, a lesson learned, and a bridge built over the chasm of misunderstanding. The galaxy will remember the miscommunication as a cautionary tale, a testament to the lengths humanity will go to protect itself, but also a reminder of the heavy cost of fear and the urgent need for understanding.